Educator to get out there and share their stories, their anecdotes, testimonials, and actually say what is going on in the classroom so that we can have these solutions.
We each inspire, I think, each other and that energy, and that's how movement builds, right? We see what happened in West Virginia, we saw what happened in LA, and we are all part of the same struggle and the same fight.
Public schools will continue to be that place of inclusion, that place of love, that place where we can restore students.
It was like being undocumented myself. I'm hoping I'm inspiring others to say, you don't have to be afraid. We have 1.7 million members that have my back.
This is about educating our children, having an educated, strong workforce, and I believe in that.
That people are willing to take their time to come here and show solidarity and show how important public education is. There's nothing like it. It fills my heart with joy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We gather now in this moment asking that you would settle yourselves as we prepare to invoke God's presence in this place. I'm happy to be here, and since I want to get back to Philadelphia, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Jerry Jordan, our local president, and because I want to stay AME, the Reverend Regina Thomas as well. I'm glad to be here to pray with you and to celebrate with you, and with that, let us turn now our attention inward. Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from a stormy blast and our eternal home. We are gathered today in this place to deal with the pressing matters of our time. We come today calling you by different names, but we acknowledge that you are the source and strength of our lives. While we hope that our attendees get outside this week and enjoy all that there is to do and to see in our nation's capital, we are reminded that we are here to conduct serious business. The work of the AFT has perhaps not been as important as it is today, except for the days in which it was founded. We remember and thank you for those founders and early members of this organization. We who are gathered today stand on the shoulders of women and men who faced threats, who lost jobs, who faced retaliation, who had their character assassinated, all because they sought to organize. We don't take our coming together to get today, Lord, for granted, and we thank you for their sacrifice. And as we eat from the fruit of trees that we did not plant, let us be faithful stewards of the tremendous legacy that they left behind and be worthy to bear their name. Bless now the current leadership of the AFT. Bless Randi Weingarten and all of the persons who keep her arms lifted up in this organization moving forward. Bless each local president, organizer, staff who go into hostile environments to fight for the rights of underpaid and underappreciated members and our children, who are our most valuable asset. Restore each teacher for the lessons of love that they have poured out into our children, but also for every dollar that they've had to spend from their own pockets to ensure that children had food to eat, backpacks and clothes to wear, and anything else that they needed before they could even sit down to learn their lesson for the day. And now, God, as we spend this time together, as we celebrate, inspire, and support one another, stir up the gifts of the AFT so that they will go back to the classrooms and raise up a generation that values democracy, that embraces diversity, and that realizes that we are stronger together. Help them to raise up critically thinking children that will grow up and lead us into a bright future. Keep our teachers and children safe in their buildings. Protect them from all hurt, harm, and danger. And move our elected officials and society past simple solutions to do the hard work so that our educators are not also called to be armed school security. We know it seems impossible to move past where we are right now, but we know that you specialize in doing the impossible. You have the power to open up red seas of impossibilities with just a word. And so now, God, just as you move through labor leaders Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to say to Pharaoh, let my people go, move even now through this body so that they will stand up for the least of these in our society and say to the pharaohs of our day, whether they be on the school board, in the city hall, in the state house, or in the White House, let my people go. Let my people go to good quality schools regardless of their zip code. Let my people go to schools free of lead poisoning in their water and paint. Let my people go to schools with technology of the day, whether their parents are affluent or poor. Let my people go to schools free from metal detectors because our world has become a safer place. Let my people go to schools free from bullying and harassment regardless of who children choose to love. Let my people go to schools where they do not face discrimination because of the origin of their birth. Let my people go to schools where race is no longer a barrier to quality education. And oh God, let our people go not only to go to school, but to come out without the debt that they'll have to die with. Lord, we pray today that you will use each of us to truly let your people go. It's in your name that we pray and ask it all. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President of the Washington Teachers Union, Liz Davis.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2019 AFT TEACH Conference. I'm Elizabeth Davis, the proud president of the Washington Teachers Union AFT Local 6. Give it up. And that tells me that we have some proud WTU members in the audience, so I want to hear you give it up for yourselves, folks, because you've done an amazing job. On behalf of all the WTU members, it's my pleasure to welcome everyone here to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Here in D.C., the WTU has embraced the AFT's Fund Our Future campaign. Our members have worked hard to add over $10 million more than the mayor's proposed budget to the schools, especially those schools who have been underfunded for decades in the poorest parts of our city, especially in Wards 7 and 8. We've also built powerful alliances with other unions and better relationships with parents, stakeholders outside of the school district, union leaders, and other union affiliates. The volunteers, parents, students, educators who have worked with us over the past 4 years have basically helped us to become the most powerful union in the District of Columbia. That's the Washington Post comment, not mine. Despite the Supreme Court Janus ruling, our membership has grown by more than 2,500 members. Thank you. And our organizing blitz continues throughout the summer and during back-to-school time to show new teachers the value and power of union membership. Along with bringing more members into the union family, we're also working hard to amplify teachers' voice, from establishing an ongoing contract campaign, ward by ward, to meeting city council members on various issues affecting teaching and learning. Our most recent effort was to have our city council amend the law preventing the union from negotiating teacher evaluation. Thank you. As of 2 weeks ago, Councilmember Trayon White introduced an amendment to the law making evaluation negotiable. 7 other council members signed on as co-sponsors of the bill. In the last election cycle, the WTU helped to elect 4 teachers to the State Board of Education. So needless to say, 2019 ushered in a new era of teacher insurgency, teacher power, and amplified teachers' voice. And speaking of teacher voices, you'll hear from several of your colleagues who will share the testimony and words of wisdom throughout the TEACH conference. But before you hear from two of those teachers shortly, I want to remind you of a few key things while at TEACH. Please look at the screen for the AFT Code of Conduct. You can also find it on the program, page 38. We don't want you to forget to wear your badges at all times when you're in the hotel or attending a TEACH event. If you have a smartphone, tablet, please make sure you download the AFT TEACH app. Go to the App Store and download the Event Mobile app and enter the code TEACH19. Get engaged on social media. Post pictures of your TEACH experiences using hashtag TEACH19. And over the next few days, I hope you enjoy our wonderful city, take back many new skills and lots of new research strategies to your classrooms and programs to help your students succeed and for you to thrive as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Go forward, meet old friends, new friends, and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Good afternoon, AFT. My name is Tom Frank. I'm a music educator and Vice President of Organizing for the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. I have always been passionate about service to my community. I do this as a public school music educator and as an alumnus of AFT's Teacher Leader Program. My first year in CPS coincided with Ohio Republicans pushing the anti-collective bargaining bill, Senate Bill 5. I was motivated by my experience to stand up for our rights. I knew what it was like to work without a union or a contract. And I knew that this was not a time to sit back. During this campaign, that little spark of activism within me became a burning fire. Since then, I have grown as a leader. The officers of CFT saw what was coming with Friedrichs and Janus, and we organized. As a result, the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers has increased membership, doing the opposite of what our foes wanted. CFT leadership continues to work in and with our community. We have kept charter school expansion out of Cincinnati, and we have passed school tax levies nearly every year for the past 8 years. This year, I became a Cincinnati Public Schools credentialed lead teacher as well as a master teacher in Ohio. This gives me more chances to give back and fight forward. Any chance I have, I lobby our legislators for better public education. AFT Teacher Leaders Program taught me how to connect the dots that bring together greater power for teachers and gave me the tools to motivate other teachers to advocate for their needs. Since its pilot year in 2012, the program has had cadres in 32 locals and now has more than 1,100 alumni. We have a table in the expo and we would love to say hi to you. Thank you so much. Have a great teach.
Good afternoon, AFT brothers and sisters. My name is Rosa Soto Thomas. I'm the president of the St. Croix Federation of Teachers. Thank you. As Randy says, we care, we fight, we show up. We certainly do a whole lot of caring, fighting, and showing up in the Virgin Islands. 8 years ago, our governor won his re-election on the promise of giving educators a raise. Yet shortly after his re-election, we got an 8% cut. 6 years went by without a raise, but educators show up. While the local union lobbied the Senate, held demonstrations, and garnered the public support. The next governor did very little until he was up for re-election. This time, educators got their raises, but did not re-elect him. Thank you. Thank you. Local unions in the Virgin Islands remain vigilant to identify leaders who have education and workers' safety as a #1 priority. On September 19, 2017, Hurricane Maria caused substantial damage to 13 schools on St. Croix. Not to be deterred, all members and the community engaged in cleanups in an attempt to get schools started. 2 years later, educators continue to teach in schools that are in dire need of repairs and in many instances unsafe. With AFT's assistance, members receive post-hurricane emergency kits and student wraparound services. I'd like to thank the AFT nurses volunteers who conducted hearing and vision screening in the Virgin Islands. Thank you. UFT personally delivered bags with school supplies, and Randi visited and met with the current governor. Our next fight is for school repairs, adequate textbooks, copier machines, and updated technology. Recently, 14 educators were trained in the AFT Strategies for Student Success program, laying the groundwork to establish a viable professional development program to support our educators. We will continue to fight, as we have always done. I just want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the Fund Our Future campaign launched by the AFT is alive and well in the Virgin Islands. Thank you all for your support.
After years of disrespect and disinvestment, educators are standing up for the respect they deserve and the funding they need. Combining personal activism with the collective power of their union, AFT members are changing the education and political landscape across the country. In 2018, West Virginia educators sparked walkouts that spread across the country. Legislators continue to underestimate their resolve, trying to ram through anti-public education legislation.
You can do it during the school year, you can do it during summer, you can do it on Christmas Day, and I have no doubt we'd have a strong showing.
The Los Angeles teacher strike transfixed the nation. 80% of the public stood with the teachers against a superintendent more interested in privatization than funding schools.
It's so empowering. I mean, look at the way we've all come together for a greater good.
We have unions united. We have this state united.
Educators from across California built on that momentum and forced the California legislature to take on charter accountability legislation. Unionized charter school teachers throughout the United States are also demanding accountability from intransigent administrators and charter school boards.
They're running it like a business, treating the teachers and the students like line items.
Predatory, for-profit charter management companies operate in darkness.
I want to see a change in the charter landscape of this city, and that's not going to happen without activism.
How do we elevate teachers' voice and judgment to change the culture so that the teaching profession is marked by trust, respect, and the freedom to teach?
At locals across the country, educators are innovating and finding solutions through AFT's Teacher Leader program.
I was emboldened by getting a glimpse inside the policy-making side of education, which seemed really untouchable to me.
It really does help to engender that feeling of all fighting together.
In the face of a decade of education cuts, Fund Our Future has become a rallying cry at state capitals across the nation.
We need to make sure that lawmakers know that our students are the bedrock.
It was also a great opportunity for people all over the state to come together as we are marching and rallying, taking it to the State House. So it's a great day. You see this energy out here.
Does anyone else out there feel undervalued?
Being here today means that I'm representing future generations. I'm standing here with my children,
and I'm thinking about my children's children.
Politicians are taking notice, seeing that the path to the White House runs through educators. Democratic candidates are engaging members in AFT Votes town halls.
It helps to see that the political process is, it's for everybody in the union and everybody needs to be connected to it.
Democracy is in crisis. You are the defenders of democracy.
At this moment in America, educators must do as they have done throughout history. Stand at the front line to protect democracy, decency, and justice. Fighting bigotry, whether it be racially motivated police shootings, discrimination of LGBTQ individuals, the rise of white nationalism, or demagoguery of immigrants. In the upcoming election, there is so much at stake, and yet an extraordinary opportunity to change America for the better.
You have to have power, and you have to have the investment.
The path to a just society begins with educators having the resources and respect necessary to provide every child with a quality public education.
What do we do?
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Highland. I am a literacy teacher at a public middle school in the Bronx, and I am a proud member of the United Federation of Teachers and the AFT. I have a distinction I never imagined or wanted to have. I am the lead plaintiff in Highland v. Navient. A lawsuit charging this powerful student loan servicer with deceiving borrowers like me and preventing us from accessing debt relief we are entitled to. After I finished my master's degree and started repaying my loans, I looked into whether I qualified for public service loan forgiveness, which was established to help teachers and others who enter careers in public service pay back student debt. I was thrilled and relieved when Navient informed me that I qualified for loan forgiveness, and that after 10 years and 120 monthly payments, the remainder of my debt would be discharged. Along the way, I called Navient to confirm that I was on track, and each year, they told me that I was. Then, after 9 years and never missing a payment on my loan, Navient informed me that I didn't qualify for loan forgiveness because I had the wrong type of loan. I filed complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Department of Education, but my complaints were ignored or closed without investigation. I also tried to get the media to expose this situation. Eventually, after fighting for years on my own, I resigned myself to another 10 years of crushing loan payments. Like millions of Americans, my student debt burden means my husband and I are unable to buy a home. I have to borrow money to pay for my daughter's preschool. We don't take vacations or do many of the things we'd be able to do if I wasn't still paying off loans years after I should have been debt-free. My student loan debt affected my professional path as well. I didn't pursue a master's degree in special education or administration because I couldn't fathom taking on more student loan debt. That's unfortunate, not just for me, but for the kids I serve. Why am I telling you, a room full of mostly strangers, about one of the most agonizing experiences of my life? Because at a time when I felt powerless and alone, my union offered me hope. The only bright light in this ordeal has been the AFT. Our president, Randi Weingarten, has made it her crusade to fight for borrowers like me, and to take that fight to unscrupulous loan servicers and the government agencies that are letting them rip off borrowers. With Randi's support, 10 other AFT members and I filed that national class action lawsuit against Navient. Navient has been able to get away with misleading and profiting off of people like me, because it's hard to go up against a huge corporation on your own. I know. But we're not on our own any longer. Randi has expanded the AFT's student debt clinics, which have helped thousands of AFT members reduce their student loan burden. She is leading the fight in Congress to ensure that public employees like me can easily enroll in loan forgiveness. I've heard Randi say that together in our union, we can achieve things that would be impossible for individuals on their own. That certainly is true in my case. I was sure that my family and I would have parts of our lives on hold for another decade. With Randi and my fellow 1.7 million members of the AFT behind me, I finally feel hopeful. Solidarity is not a slogan for Randi. It is a guiding principle. She is in my corner and yours. Randi, I am so grateful to you. It is my great honor to introduce the President of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten.
All I can say is I'm glad I was not mic'd when I just said what I said to Katie. And I want to say in a minute a thank you to Katie, but I also want to say a thank you to all of you. You are in Washington, D.C. on one of the maybe hottest days in the hottest months, learning about our profession, teaching ourselves what to do. That is awesome, and I want to thank all of you for being here doing that work. You can clap for yourselves. And I also want to thank our amazing Secretary-Treasurer, Loretta Johnson, who's right here. And our newly elected Executive Vice President, Evelyn De Jesus, who's right here. I want to thank the unionized staff of this hotel, who has been awesome already. And there are a lot of other people I want to thank, but I also want to thank my wife, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum. And Katie, where is Katie? There she is. If we can help you, and there's Katie's daughter. And if we can help you, oh, I'm sorry. If we can help you and your family have fewer sleepless nights, believe me, we will. That is union work. But speaking of losing sleep, what you see on the screen behind me, this is what haunts me. These horrors, this cruelty, this indifference to people's humanity keeps me up at night. Because don't we teach for this and this? How did the United States get to those first pictures? And can we change it? Yes, we can. America's public school educators, you, America's public school educators, you are change agents. You guide young people not only to build skills and knowledge, but to build relationships. You instill appreciation for diversity and respect differences. You help our country realize its promise and help people have a better life. You are the essence of public education. Horace Mann, John Dewey, and Margaret Haley, who was a founding mother of the AFT, saw public schooling as central to the well-being of society and the strength of our democracy. So did Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, and Al Shanker. Al frequently invoked the AFT's founding motto, democracy in education and education for democracy. Because that is what public education is at its best. A ladder of opportunity, a path out of poverty, a place to develop the muscle of civic participation, where we both embrace America's diversity and forge a common identity, indeed the foundation of democracy. But our country is dangerously divided. Will hope or fear prevail? Aspiration or despair? Humanity or cruelty? This, my friends, is a moment of reckoning for our collective national character. Our democracy is under assault. Donald Trump has waged a war on truth and on the press. He's trampled the rights and responsibilities enshrined in the Constitution. He has scoffed at the rule of law and stoked America's divisions in order to exploit them, spurring neighbors to turn on each other, driving wedges between people who actually want the same things, like parents and teachers, and inciting people to fear others for absolutely no good reason. I love that dog that's in the room, don't worry about it. He embraces despots while distancing our allies. He has put commerce and greed over human rights. And his economic agenda has widened the gap between the rich and the rest of us. Some of you have heard me say this before, but today, the 400 richest Americans, less than 1/4 of 1%, have more wealth than the bottom 60% of the people in our country. Claiming it's the best economy ever doesn't make it true. Just ask people in McDowell County, West Virginia, or Lordstown, Ohio, communities that have been abandoned by industry and now further betrayed by the president who promised he would help them. Many of you see the impact of this in your classrooms every day. The bullying and the hatred that permeates society are on the rise in our schools. Economic stress has you stocking more snacks for your students and taking more money out of your own pockets for school supplies. And at this moment, when we need more civic participation, not less, subjects like American government and civics are squeezed out because standardized testing still compels schools to fixate on math and language arts. This is not the first time our democracy has been at risk, but today, its survival falls on us. Why? Because we are part of two institutions that are essential to the American dream: public education and the labor movement. Public schools and labor unions are direct pathways to broad-based prosperity and to pluralism. They are how people have and can achieve a better life. And you, sorry to do this to you, but you, AFT members, you are at the nexus of both. That is why together
We must play a vital role, moving the country towards our better angels. We must ensure that our better days are ahead of us, not behind us. And I know we can. Think about what we've already done. Remember the false narrative about public schools a decade ago, about the so-called bad teachers, failing students, and a system supposedly so broken that only privatization and austerity were the answers. We've busted up those myths one by one. For much of the last decade, it felt like we were in a knife fight, outnumbered by a bunch of billionaires and ideologues intent on reducing teachers and students to a test score, dividing parents and teachers, pauperizing our schools, and scapegoating and slandering public school teachers. Slowly but surely, we've changed the narrative by telling our story about what works in our schools and what doesn't, about the devastating toll disinvestment has taken on our kids, on our educators, and our communities, about teachers' deep dedication to our students and our craft, by confronting the privatizers and the pauperizers, and by unmasking the true intentions of people like Michelle Rhee and Betsy DeVos. Americans are committed to their public schools, which 90% of American children attend. Polls show that parents and the public want greater support for public schools, particularly neighborhood public schools. They want public schools strengthened when they struggle, not shuttered or supplanted by private alternatives. And the teacher strikes have been an amazing inflection point, making clear to America that teachers want what students need. Together, we have changed the narrative. Now we have to change the politics. But that takes power. Not power for its own sake, but power so we can transform our aspirations into action. So we can make every public school a place parents want to send their kids, where teachers want to teach, and where students feel safe and engaged. Sure, teachers have always had power, the power to ignite a spark that engages a disaffected student, the power that comes from students wanting to earn your respect, the power that comes from your fierce devotion to your students and your craft. But in our disproportionately female, caring profession, we have not always been comfortable owning our own power, much less building it. For example, how many of you have been in conversations questioning why the union is involved in elections? Right? But you know who owns their power? Wall Street, the Koch brothers, Mitch McConnell. My friends, we need to own our power, and we need to build our power so we can move our agenda for our students and our families, for safe, welcoming, and well-funded public schools, for affordable higher education, for healthcare that is a right, not a privilege, for a living wage, for a decent retirement, for a healthy climate, and for a stronger democracy. And to get those babies, and children out of those detention centers and back with their families. history is our guide. When the Dred Scott case upheld slavery, abolitionists didn't capitulate. They built their power, and they ended slavery. When suffragists were arrested for voting and for picketing the White House, they didn't meekly submit. They built their power, and they won the vote. And when child labor laws, a minimum wage, and the 8-hour workday were struck down by the Supreme Court, the labor movement did not abjectly surrender. It built its power and won back those rights and more. We must build power for democracy in education and for education for democracy. Our opponents, right-wing groups and billionaire extremists like Betsy DeVos and Sheldon Adelson, often understand our power better than we do. That's why they fight to suppress the vote, to fund our schools, and to stabilize our unions. They're hell-bent on depriving us of power. And that's what the anti-union Janus case was all about. But, as you all know, because you're in this room, a funny thing happened on their way to writing our obituary. Janus was a blow. The AFT lost 85,000 fee payers instantly. But Janus also inspired us to do more of what we do best as a union, to engage with members, to demonstrate the value of unionism. And it reminded us of an essential truth about unions that Katie mentioned earlier. Together, we can achieve what would be impossible to do on our own. So let's be clear, though. The attacks on unions didn't end with Janus. Right-wing groups and anti-union groups have already filed 80 lawsuits against us since the decision was brought last year. But our members are sticking with the union, and despite everything that has been thrown at us, the AFT continues to grow 1.7 million strong. So, to our enemies' vexation, we are thriving. Our allies not only took back the House of Representatives in 2018, we won support for school funding measures from South Florida to upstate New York, and we elected pro-public education, pro-worker governors in Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, and this one is really sweet, Wisconsin. Imagine a teacher defeating Scott Walker. We cannot rest. And it's not simply because our opponents aren't going away, but because we are the change agents, we are the movement builders, we are the dreamers, we are the fighters for a better life, a better world, and the soul of America. And that's why this year, the AFT has used our collective voice and harnessed our power to do the following 4 things. 1, for safe and welcoming environments in our schools and communities. 2, to demand the investments we need in public services and public schools. 3,
for the freedom to teach so we can meet our students' needs, and 4, for the freedom to live without having to work 2 or 3 jobs and without worrying about healthcare costs or crushing student debt. So let's start with investment. The root cause of every single teacher walkout in the last 2 years was deep and prolonged inadequate investment in our public schools, higher education, and public services. Those moments of activism, of Red for Ed, must grow into a movement for sustainable funding. For public education to be the great equalizer, adequate funding must be available for all children to reach their potential. So that's why the AFT has launched a nationwide campaign called Fund Our Future to combat the austerity and privatization that created these deplorable teaching and learning conditions in all too many schools. And starting this spring, thousands of our members have stepped up, demonstrated, and lobbying in more than 120 collective actions and countless individual ones. AFT local unions across the country are not just joining in. Grassroots leaders are part of the planning every step of the way. And while we've made progress, there is still much left to do. 21 states still spend less on public education today than they did a decade ago. 21 states. Class sizes of 40 or 50 kids, schools that are freezing in the winter and sweltering in warmer months, water fountains that can't be used because they are contaminated with lead. You know I can go on, and so could you. In 38 states, teacher salaries are lower than they were before the Great Recession. So how dare these so-called leaders devalue and disrespect the profession that shapes the next generation of Americans? With Fund Our Future, the AFT is taking all of this on. And while the educator strikes from Los Angeles to Chicago to West Virginia have gotten much warranted attention, change is happening across the nation. The Boston Teachers Union recently won they're in the House. They recently won contract language guaranteeing a nurse in every school and more mental health professionals. In Louisiana and Texas, and we need to say a prayer for Louisiana right now, given what is going on. In Louisiana and Texas, school employees have gotten their first raises in years. And Washington, D.C. has a big role in this. Betsy DeVos attempted to cut $9 billion from education funding this year. But the new Democratic majority in the House of Representatives said, no thanks, and instead passed a funding bill that increases investment for public schools by $4.5 billion for programs like Title I and IDEA. But you know, that's not the end of the story. Mitch McConnell has stymied the bill in the Senate, so it was really awesome that so many of you lobbied yesterday for this bill. Thank you very much. The AFT is working on a number of fronts to make our schools, workplaces, and communities safe, healthy, and welcoming. No one, I can't believe I have to actually even say this, no one should fear for their safety at school or work. but I know many of us in this room do, and so do our students. In the aftermath of the massacre in Parkland, Florida, a majority of American teens said they are worried about the possibility of a shooting at their school, and most parents share that concern. While rarely discussed, anxiety and depression afflict so many families in America, as does the opioid crisis. Between 2009 and 2017, depression amongst adolescents increased by more than 60%. Tragically, teen suicides have also soared. No family or community is immune to mental health issues, and our schools must be equipped to meet these needs. And we're also seeing a disturbing rise in hatred and bigotry in our schools. Just consider the Southern Poverty Law Center's recent survey. 2/3 of the educators who responded witnessed hate or bias incidents in their schools in the fall of 2018. So this is why those three issues and more, why we advocate with such urgency for community schools and wraparound services. It's why we fight for a fixation on kids' well-being and against the toxic fixation on testing. It's why we fight every day for laws and policies and services that benefit kids' physical and emotional health, that create supportive environments that keep students and educators safe and give them peace of mind. The teacher uprisings of the last 2 years have laid bare the frustration over insufficient resources, deplorable conditions, and inadequate pay. But you really know the other cause of this frustration, and that's the deprofessionalization that strips us of the freedom to teach, the denial of teachers' expertise, of teachers' experience, of teachers' judgment, of teachers' voice. How many of us entered the profession excited, optimistic, determined to make a difference in our students' lives? But how much have we witnessed that optimism wane under the stress and disrespect soon experienced? Some of you have heard me say this already, but it's being told to teach lockstep to a pacing calendar, even if students need more time on a particular topic. It's getting in trouble for allowing students to continue a debate over 2 days instead of 1. It's drowning in a sea of paperwork or feeling more like a test prep manager than a teacher. And too often, it's being not heard or even asked about decisions that affect our classrooms. This isn't just demoralizing. It denies us the freedom to teach, not the freedom to do anything we want, but to do what we know is right based upon our knowledge, preparation, and experience. And all of that defies common sense, undermines our profession, and hurts our students. The freedom to teach stands on 3 foundations: a culture of collaboration in schools and districts, and the time to deliver it, or to deliver on it, frankly. The recognition that teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions, and ensuring that teachers have voice and agency befitting our profession. AFT affiliates are using the tools of advocacy, legislation, and negotiation to make the freedom to teach real, like negotiating anti-retaliation language, which the United Federation of Teachers just did in its last contract. Why? Think about it. How important it is, because it ensures that teachers are not afraid of broaching hard subjects or taking other risks to meet our students' needs. It's professional development days designed and delivered by our members in places like Meriden, Connecticut, and Pinellas County, Florida. I know Connecticut and Florida are in the house. And this one, I love this one. In Cincinnati, where the district relies on the union to deliver high-quality orientation for new teachers. It's in places like Cleveland, where the new teacher, is Cleveland here? It's in places like Cleveland where the new teacher evaluation system is more about teacher and student development and less about test scores, and where the union and the district, this is Cleveland, where the union and the district are collaborating to reduce unnecessary and unhelpful testing. In the ABC school district in California, which I have mentioned many times, they're not only improving and have improved teacher retention and student learning through their highly regarded labor management collaboration, they've now developed an institute that this year alone has helped 20 other Californian school systems do the same. And this can happen on the state level as well. Like in New Mexico, with the Grow Your Own Teachers Act that provides school paraprofessionals a $6,000 scholarship per semester so that paras can keep their jobs as they study to become teachers. This will result in a more diverse teaching force with deep community connections. Okay, I know this crowd, even though we have a lot of new people here, so I know that some people are already saying, okay, I can see UFT can do that, Cleveland can do that, ABC can do that, but really, how can I do that? The truth is, you already do. For starters, you differentiate instruction to meet your students' needs. But this is my point. You shouldn't have to hope no one catches you doing what you know is best for your students. The freedom to teach should be part of the culture of teaching. So, the AFT is here to support you. Share my lesson. The AFT's free online, not on loan. I have loans and student loans on my mind. The AFT's free online platform has resources you can download and communities you can join. And the AFT Collective Bargaining Center is producing a guide this fall with the best-in-class contract language from AFT affiliates, because we are putting the force of collective bargaining behind the freedom to teach. So, I've talked today about things worth fighting for and things that keep me up at night, like Katie's experience with Navient. And I know that many of you feel the anxiety of student debt firsthand, every day, and with every loan payment. So the AFT student debt work falls under 3 categories. The first is navigating a broken system, and that's why the AFT started our student debt clinic several years ago, and we've helped thousands of members manage their student loan debt, often greatly reducing their monthly payments. And just as some locals, like the UFT, have built on the original concept, we're adding a new AFT benefit, access to a new app to help our members handle their student loan debt and enroll in income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness. It's called Summer, and it will be free for AFT members. And everything Everything I've talked about, share my lessons, summer, you'll see all the booths outside about all of this. But we have to do more than help you navigate a broken system. Americans hold $1.6 trillion in student debt, affecting 45 million people. The average student loan for a master's degree in education jumped 87% from 2002 to 2016. And this bipartisan public service loan forgiveness program, which Congress passed in 2007, was intended to help. But as Katie's experience shows, it's not working. So we're supporting plans that both simplify and provide much more loan forgiveness, like those advanced by Senators Warren and Sanders and Kaine and Gillibrand. But third, we have to demand accountability for loan servicers like Navient, which have misled and exploited tens and thousands of borrowers, and we have to hold the DeVos Education Department to account for making it virtually impossible for people to secure public service loan forgiveness. That's why last fall we filed the Highland suit against Navient for its deceptive practices, and today we are filing suit against Betsy DeVos for her role I'm sure we'll get a tweet by her before the end of my speech. So we're filing suit against DeVos for her role in sabotaging public service loan forgiveness, and the suit is called Weingarten versus DeVos. And 8 AFT members, the AFT and I, are the plaintiffs. And frankly, as a recovering lawyer, I am glad that I have the standing to demand justice for every one of our members who have been hurt by Betsy DeVos's malfeasance. So look, this is all union work, caring, fighting, showing up. The freedom to teach gives us voice in our work. Feeling safe in school and being free of crushing student debt gives us freedom from anxiety. But there is no freedom more important than having a democracy and a voice in it. Teachers have always had a huge responsibility for the next generation to teach and nurture our students so that they have the opportunity to live fulfilling lives, to help them develop judgment and discernment, to be engaged citizens, to fight for social judgment and make our classrooms, and actually social justice, not just social judgment, and make our classrooms and schools safe havens for our students. But today, my friends, our role is even bigger. America's teachers are called on to be the defenders of decency and the guardians of democracy, because the very foundations of America are being undermined every day. Alexis de Tocqueville, the 19th century French observer of American democracy, wrote, and I quote, "America is great because she is good. If America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great." While our democracy has never been perfect, today its very existence is threatened. Our national government has become a platform for the promotion of hatred and prejudice. a pulpit for authoritarianism, and a megaphone for shouting down the democratic ideals that have motivated what is best in America. And you know this better than I do. Our classrooms or schools are not immune from the toxic political and social climate enabled by the president and his accomplices. Our freedoms are under attack by a president who threatens to imprison his political opponents, who openly wishes he could get rid of journalists, who props up white nationalism, and who cozies up to dictators while shunning our allies. Our elections are undermined by widespread voter suppression, by extreme partisan gerrymandering, which was just upheld by the Supreme Court, and by open invitations to foreign interference, with President Trump even joking about it with Vladimir Putin last month. Our very moral character as a nation is tested when government leaders see immigrants and asylum seekers not as tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, but as invaders so threatening, so worthless, that the government's own inhumane treatment of them, denying children adequate food, sleep, and hygiene, is somehow deserved. In a civil society, there are no both sides on matters of human dignity, equal rights, tolerance of diversity, civility and truth, or the rule of law. These are not options against which other beliefs can be regarded as equally worthy. But today, these values need defending, and that is why we must be the guardians of democratic principles. So I'm asking you to be clear-eyed about the perilous time we are in, to think deeply and seriously about what you can do to take a stand, and also about the implications of doing nothing. We may have chuckled, as I did, when President Trump revealed that he thinks Frederick Douglass is still alive, or earlier this month, that American patriots stormed airports during the Revolutionary War. There were a lot of great memes. But we can't lose sight of Trump's unconscionable cruelty, or that his erratic behavior is intended to create chaos and confusion. And we can't assume that things won't get worse. Now, most of us didn't become educators because we wanted to be political activists. But as educators with a conscience, we can do nothing else. To paraphrase Hillel, if not us, who? If not now, when? So while I would never ask you to take on all these issues or to go it alone, the fight to safeguard American democracy begins in our classrooms and our schools. And TEACH is chock full of how-to sessions. And in some ways, our journey to exercise the freedom to teach is a model for what our students need to be engaged and empowered citizens: voice, latitude, and the ability to think for oneself. Just think about it. When classrooms are freed from the tyranny of testing and test prep, we have time for project-based learning. So students can analyze problems in their communities, figure out potential solutions, and advocate for change. When lockstep pacing calendars no longer rule, we can have extended classroom discussions and debates. We can model democratic deliberation where disagreements are over ideas, not people, and dissenting views are respectfully heard, not shouted down, where opinions need to be supported with logical arguments and evidence, not simply asserted, where discourse is to persuade, not to name-call or bully. When our students experience the power of democratic citizenship in their education, they will not surrender it, but they will exercise it. And then they will demand the fullest of democracy for all Americans. Democracy in education has always been the foundation for providing education for democracy. When students understand that our democracy rests upon free and fair elections, then they see that their first and most responsible and important right and duty is to vote and to defend the right of all Americans to vote. That's why it's so important that students who are eligible to vote have every opportunity to register and to cast their ballots. When the rule of law, a free press, and checks and balances become more than words on a page, students start feeling their own power to petition their government and to be heard. So, and I'm not just talking to my fellow social studies teachers in the room, help them develop the confidence to make their voices heard, the courage to challenge injustice, the knowledge of their rights and the rights of others. And frankly, it's not just our students. Too many Americans sat on the sidelines in the last presidential election. Too many people sit out every election. Michelle Obama's When We All Vote initiative aims to increase participation in elections and to close the race and the age voting gap, and the AFT is an active partner with her. Finally, this is the hint for those who actually have the pool on how long my speech is. Finally, we need to be all in 2020, which is why first and foremost, the AFT's presidential endorsement process is about engagement, the most member engagement ever. We must practice what we preach about empowerment and civic participation. So the goal of our endorsement process is obviously determining or trying to determine which candidate or candidates share our values and can get elected. But the other goal is to make sure that our members feel ownership of it, because the stakes are higher than ever, and no one can sit on the sidelines in 2020. And so, as many of you know, we do these town halls, and already 7 presidential candidates have participated in town halls with our members. And you can check out the videos on aftvotes.org, and more are in the works. We used to be grateful if there was even one question about education in presidential debates. Now, your colleagues are asking tough questions of the candidates directly, and they're getting thoughtful responses. You know how I said we helped change the narrative about public schools? What better proof of that than the robust plans that so many presidential candidates are putting forth on public education? Bernie Sanders would enact universal pre-K and make tuition free at public colleges. Tim Ryan, I'll let people clap for anything you want to clap for. So I'm going to tell you that again. Bernie has said universal pre-K and made tuition free at public colleges. Tim Ryan has laid out a detailed agenda around social and emotional learning. Kamala Harris was the first to talk about raising teacher salaries, and now several other candidates are also doing that, and to put college within reach. Amy Klobuchar calls for increased investments in school infrastructure and help for working families with after-school programs. Elizabeth Warren was the first to pledge to select a teacher as her Secretary of Education. Now many of them are, and to take on student debt and childcare. Joe Biden calls for tripling Title I, investing in community schools, and doubling the number of school psychologists, counselors, and nurses. Beto O'Rourke would forgive 100% of student loan debt for public school teachers. And those are just the candidates we've had town halls with so far. 10 years ago, Time magazine emblazoned its cover I don't even have to say it, with this image of a school superintendent sweeping out so-called bad teachers. Today, presidential candidates are one-upping each other with their support of teachers and public schools. We've changed the narrative about public education, and in so doing, have helped preserve it. Now, we have to safeguard democracy. But it's going to take all of us taking a stand and doing our part. Getting involved through your local union. Get involved in local and national politics. And vote. And vote for people in office who share our priorities and who can make the changes we seek. I look at the state of our country, and I end with the question I started with. Can we change it? So, whatever your priorities, climate change, healthcare, living wages, retirement security, support for public schools, support for our students, immigration, higher education, the fight for justice and for our democracy. Let's find a candidate who shares our values and who can win, and then let's do everything in our power to make that happen. It won't be easy. Remember the words of Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. My friends, we cannot be silent. Our moment to save democracy is here and now. And when this moment in history is written, let it be said that America's teachers rose to the challenge, that hope won against fear, aspiration against and over frustration, humanity over cruelty, that we defeated demagoguery, and that we preserved our democracy. Thank you.
Into this race is this basic notion of opportunity. What kind of an America we are.
For me, it made me feel much more connected to my union.
And really kind of see that the political process is for everybody in the union and everybody needs to be connected to it.
Thank you, AFT, for fighting for our educators, our kids, and our future. My second grade teacher, Mrs. Lee, changed my whole world when she told me I could be a teacher. And I got to live my dream. I became a public school teacher. So here's my promise. When I'm president, The Secretary of Education will also be a former public school teacher. Our government will be on the side of the teachers and the students. That's where we belong.
It's within our power.
What are you going to do about protecting teachers in the classroom, about protecting us as union members? We have a vested interest in speaking for the students. I mean, this is what we do. This is who we are.
Not only increase, but triple from $15 billion a year to $45 billion a year, Title I. Hi, this is Joe Biden. I'm Joe Biden's husband. You know, Jill has a saying that any country that out-educates us is going to outcompete us. And I was happy to be at the AFT Forum in Houston, where I was able to outline my plan as to how we deal with this issue of better education and better opportunities for teachers. We have to provide educators the support and respect they need and deserve. It matters. We have to invest in all our children from birth so that regardless of their zip code, their parents' income, or disability that they may have, are prepared to succeed in tomorrow's economy. I know from watching Jill all these years that for educators, the profession isn't what they do, it's who they are. They answer a call to service. They help children learn and grow into successful adults. Often the role extends far beyond the classroom, whether they are helping students compete for college or whether job applications or providing personal encouragement or actually dealing with serious personal problems. So many young people, knowing they have a teacher believing in them, fighting for them, it can make a gigantic difference. You're changing people's lives. And I want to thank you. Thank you, thank you. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
You, even a younger teacher.
I feel very proud to be in a union that gets presidential candidates to show up and back us up and speak with us. It makes me feel like we've got an important job.
Hello, everybody. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate all of the teachers in the room and teachers who are not in the room for having the incredible courage to protest, to march on state capitals, to demand that in the year 2019, in the richest country in the history of the world, all of our kids have a decent and quality public education. Thank you all very much for doing that. And I want to be very clear with you on something else, and that is every teacher in this country and every student in America deserves a strong public school system that is free of hunger, free of gun violence, free of discrimination or threats of privatization. Every teacher in America deserves to make at least $60,000 a year. And I say that because teachers do some of the most important work in this country. You are helping to educate the future of America. Teachers deserve to be treated with respect and to earn the salary commensurate with that respect. And every teacher in America, furthermore, deserves to be able to join a union and engage in collective bargaining. And with your help, in my administration, we will fight together and we will succeed to achieve all of those goals. Thank you again for everything that you do, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you on the campaign trail. Thank you.
When I speak of teachers, I'm thinking of paraprofessionals. I'm thinking of all of those who are part of our educational ecosystem.
Most people just say teachers and think it's the people in the classroom. So I was very excited about that.
And for them to be able to bring someone here who can listen to our concerns and try to address our issues, that makes me feel really good to see that my union is really working for me.
Hi AFT, it is Kamala, and what I want teachers to know about me is that my first grade teacher attended my law school graduation. I love teachers, and I believe it is time we give you a raise, and so that's exactly what I will do as president. My plan is to make the largest federal investment in closing the teacher pay gap, which on average is $13,500 a year. So I want to give you a $13,500 a year raise, and you can read more about it at kamalaharris.com/teachers. You have my promise that I will be a president who supports public education and stands with teachers.
So we've made this section chock full of democracy. I was wondering whether we should have a drinking game over Betsy DeVos's name or over democracy, and we just decided it was probably not the right thing to laugh about. But I want to introduce you to someone who I now read religiously. Every week, the woman to my right puts out a weekly list. And if you haven't gotten this book yet, I want you to see it. It's at Politics at Prose. It's also here at the AFT. And this lady to my right has actually written this book, and I'll talk about what it's in here in a minute. But I'll do it by this. Do you remember the first time you heard the phrase alternative facts? Anybody? When? Yes! Kellyanne Conway on January 20, this must be a group of teachers. On January 22nd, 2017, 2 days after Trump's inauguration, and it was said to defend the lies of the then press secretary, Sean Spicer, who had spoken about or lied about the size of the inauguration crowds. But this is the reason we raise it. The first time I heard it, alternative facts, I'm like, that's oxymoronic. It sounds jarring, it sounds ridiculous, but now it's said so often, it's almost a catchphrase, and our ears are becoming really used to hearing it. There are literally thousands of examples of the Trump administration using this tried and true authoritarian tactic of unleashing this onslaught of lies. And it forces us to sift through these things, searching for truth in the hope that we'll just ultimately give up. But lucky for us, we have Amy Siskind. Because what Amy has done, that's why I want you to see this book, I'm putting it right here. What Amy has done is that she has painstakingly every week made sure we know what these lies are, and we know what has violated the norm so much that we have to actually look at it. She exposes all of this. Now, one wonders, and I often wonder when I read it, because I'm exhausted when I read the weekly list, but as a former Wall Street executive, a recovering former Wall Street executive, she used in her career, she consumed vast amounts of data, and she's really amazing at synthesizing it. And in 2008, Amy co-founded the New Agenda to support women in leadership roles, to draw a line in the sand against sexism and misogyny, and to build a national organization to advance key goals for women. And in the aftermath of the 2016 election, and as every day seems to contain a month's worth of news about corruption or the erosion of our civil rights or the norms of our democracy or assaults on truth and justice, Amy has been compiling a weekly list tracking each devastating development in detail. And as I said before, this is something that Sharon and I, every week, we tend to actually read them together because we want to make sure we are not immune or that we do not normalize what is very non-normal. So please, Amy's book, The List, provides us a week-by-week reckoning of Trump's first year. But I asked her, I called her up, and I said, look, this is a group of people who really want to understand what's going on. And I could think of no one better to help us understand it than Amy Siskind. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
So, Amy said to me that my questions, when I started thinking about them, were not nearly as good as I needed to do for really trying to understand what's going on here. So I felt quite intimidated by that. And you know, and there's, you know, we have a whole bunch of things that you can do. You can ask questions about. We have on Facebook Live, you can submit questions in the comment sections. We have 2 microphones here because I want to be able to make sure that people can ask questions if they want to. For those with the TEACH app, you can submit questions via the app. And if you see a question you like, you can vote for it, and the most popular questions may be asked. But the point is this: Amy really understands a bunch of what's going on right now. So I'm going to start with my first really simple question, which is not capable of a simple answer, which is, how the heck did we get here?
So I am writing basically, thank you, Randi, by the way, for a lovely introduction. I appreciate that. And Sharon, thank you for having me. So the list in book form is the first 52 weeks. I started keeping a list in November 2016, and I'm going to talk about why a little bit, but I'm going to put it in some broader context. Just by background, the list continues. It's online, theweeklylist.org. I also do a podcast that drops every Monday morning if you want to listen for an hour and hear everything that happened during the week, as well as having it in some context. Because I'm sort of like the Rain Man. Everything that has happened for now 139 weeks, I remember, and I can put it all into some broader context. The list,
and she's still breathing.
Barely. The list and the podcast are also being archived in the Library of Congress, so effectively they're the first draft of history. So, thank you.
Yes, yes.
So I'm going to tell you the story because I'm not a political expert per se or a historian per se, but I'm going to tell you the story of how we got here from the lists, which is my expertise. The story really starts in 2014 with a company called Cambridge Analytica, which originally was founded by the Mercers, who have mysteriously disappeared, and Steve Bannon. And they were testing words like strongman and how that would resonate in the United States. And a lot of the money, which we still haven't figured out for sure where some of the dark money from Cambridge Analytica came from, but suspectedly a lot of it is from Russia. So initially, they had put their hopes into Ted Cruz. He was going to be their chosen man. And then when that didn't work out, the Mercers later came, and Cambridge Analytica moved in offices with the Trump campaign and Brad Parscale and Facebook, and so much of the infrastructure that we now know was Russia and helping them win the election. And there are actual academics, a woman Jameson at UPenn, who have done the forensic work. There's studies that just came out last week that shows that Russia did have a definitive impact on our election. But setting that aside, how did they know that we were ripe for the picking? So much of what they were able to read in our country and other parts of the world were fear of the others. Trump was able to capture that as well. If you look back at birtherism, if you look back at the day he launched his campaign in 2015, he talked about Mexican rapists. And as somebody who lives in this man's head for 139 weeks, he has not changed from the time he started his campaign. Whether you call it Mexican rapist, he is still using those tools to keep his 35% to 40% in place and dehumanize people that are brown and black. And when you talk about how that manifests itself and how that has manifested itself in our history, not in our country, but in the world with genocide and the Holocaust and so on and so forth, it's turning people into animals. And you see that now very actively. Randi touched on the alternative facts. Right now, if you watch Fox News and Trump, you believe the people coming from our southern border are illegal aliens, which they're actually asylum seekers, which is legal. But this has all been under and part of the plan since Trump took office. So the reason I started to write things down is because I noticed that things were not normal, that we can ask the same question now. What does the Republican platform look like for 2020? Can you tell me any issues? No. I mean, so there's nothing normal anymore, and same leading up to 2008. When Trump first took office, there was no sort of normal plan for what he hoped to achieve. All he started to do was separate us from the others. And in the first week after he won the election, in quotes, there were 400 attacks that the Southern Poverty Law Center tracked, which was a record. And when the media asked him to comment on that and condemn it, he said, we have to grant understanding to others, which is also a repetitive theme for him. So basically, you know, as he was taking office, I just noticed that things were not normal as they should be, that there was not a typical president. So I read up on authoritarianism. And the one thing I just want to say that should give us a certain sense of comfort, and I'm Jewish American, so I know a lot about the Holocaust. When I read up with what the experts had written, they warned pretty much verbatim in so many ways of what would happen. I'm going to read you, there was one of the articles I read was by Marcia Gessen. This is November 2016. These are two things she warned about in November 2016. The national press is likely to be among the first institutional victims of Trumpism. There is no law that requires the presidential administration to hold daily press briefings. We've had 2 daily press briefings so far in 2019. So here's something else that she wrote, Gessen wrote. There is little doubt that Trump will appoint someone who will cause the court to veer to the right. There is also the risk that it might be someone who will wreak havoc on the very culture of the high court. And there we had Brett Kavanaugh. So much of this, the comfort that I want to give, and I'm going to talk about like action items at the end, but even though our democracy is new, this uprise of authoritarianism has happened many times before around the world. But we are further along now into it than I thought we would be this far into his time in office, which is now, again, 139 weeks since the election and about 2.5 years.
I was actually talking to a bunch of people today about when you saw the news. You know, it feels like there is an expediting of a lot of these warning signs about authoritarianism. And without, you know, going through, you know, what I saw on CNN or MSNBC this morning, I would just ask you, what are the warning signs that our country is descending into authoritarianism?
Yeah, so when I started talking about this idea, and the idea is experts in authoritarianism advise to keep a list of things subtly changing around you, that we would be like the frog in water coming to boil degree by degree. Back then, myself and there were others who were speaking about this were looked at as, we were mostly women, a group of hysterical women that were so worried about authoritarianism. I tend to be, because of how deeply I am into this stuff each day, 6 to 12 months ahead of where the news cycle finally captures up. So I did a video series with MoveOn.org, and back in 2017, I was talking about the New World Order, which again, when you look at like why all these things happen, like Trump, once he took office, was already talking about discrediting NATO. And aligning ourselves with Kim Jong-un, Egypt's el-Sisi, Vladimir Putin, of course. Now he's in North Korea. But we hate France, we hate Germany. And the way this manifests itself, just in like everyday news that gets lost today on page A9 of the New York Times, 18 countries spoke up about what China is doing to Muslims there, sending them off to internment camps. 18 countries signed up, our former allies. The United States did not sign that letter. So it just shows like a change in the world order and where we fit in, that now we're one of the oligarchies like others, which goes back to what Trump wanted when he took power. He cares about 2 things, staying in power and making money. So this is part of him making money, that the countries we are doing business with, for example, when we had the Muslim ban, the countries that were conspicuously absent, like Saudi Arabia, who bombed us on 9/11, are places where he wants to do business, versus the other countries are places that are Muslim-based countries, and he threw in Venezuela, because they're like lining up at the door to come here from Venezuela. So he could say it wasn't a Muslim ban anymore and call it a travel ban. But all of these are countries where he doesn't have business interests. So much of our foreign policy, and a lot of it is captured in this first year's book. For example, Kushner wanted to refinance one of his underwater properties, 666 Fifth Avenue, the Qatar Sovereign Fund. He asked them to refinance it. They said no. What do you know? Weeks later, we side with Saudi Arabia and the UAE against Qatar in an economic blockade. So the world knows what's going on too. They know in order to be a player and have a good alliance, you have to do business with the Trumps now or in the future. So that's changed in terms of where we are as a country. And what we've learned as well are so many things that we took for granted, our checks and balances, for example, are norms, not laws. That here we are, 2.5 years in, and he's had no accountability, no consequences for anything he has done. He thumbs his nose at Congress. He thumbs his nose at our judicial branch, at the Supreme Court ruling, which, I always joke I have to check my Twitter account every half hour to make sure we haven't started World War III. So I guess on the citizenship question, in this half hour, now he's not going to do an executive order, but who knows what will happen by 8 o'clock tonight. But this is basically saying that nobody else is in charge but me. And when you think about who's making all the decisions for our country in terms of foreign policy, in terms of what we're doing domestically in our economy, and just the little nuances that are unprecedented that we don't talk about, like the Federal Reserve, which is a separate entity, and Trump bullying Jerome Powell till finally now we're going to start to lower rates. I mean, these are just all things that week after week have gotten lost in the chaos. And I joke that in any given day, there are 10 stories, 5 to 10 stories that I'm tracking in the weekly list that in normal times would be cover of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, front page, and top of the hour for weeks. Like his environmental speech 2 days ago. I mean, now it's gone. But basically what he has done, and you talked about this in the opening, is there's an alternative reality that he has established. And this is also part of authoritarianism, to discredit the media, but also starting early with the size of the inaugural crowd and the green bowling massacre, or whatever it was, and this terrorist incident in Sweden, which didn't exist. He's created, and the Seth Rich conspiracy, he's created this alternative reality with the help of propaganda stations, which are Fox News, but as well, there's Sinclair Broadcasting, which is, I call it the wolf in sheep's clothing, because it's your local station that you don't realize is getting pre-programmed things they have to show you. So in so many ways, things that we counted on, these pillars, are sort of crumbling. And we are, folks, we are at a razor's edge. I use the metaphor of the tanks rolling into our nation's capital last week. What does that say in a broader sense? It says that 2 years ago, Trump had this idea when we had a defense secretary that was confirmed. He said, "Are you kidding?" and found an excuse for 2 years not to do it. Now we have no confirmed defense secretary. We haven't had one since Mattis left in December. Most of our cabinet, most of our executive branch is run by acting so-and-sos. So the military is going along with him because it's run now by an acting person who's a former lobbyist who is beholden to Trump. And everybody who remains in his cabinet, including Betsy DeVos, their purpose within the executive branch is to deconstruct the agencies that they run. They can call it cost cutting. You can say, I'm going to give you a budget of 0 for the Consumer Protection Fraud Agency that Elizabeth Warren founded, and then Mick Mulvaney gave it a budget of 0 to totally eradicate it. That's what they're doing. They're deconstructing our executive branch. They're putting in loyalists. There's not a single person involved in our immigration policy right now that is confirmed, Senate confirmed, because they all have left. And he puts in acting people. So that's sort of the state of things more broadly.
How do you, just in terms of how you even think about how you write about this or how you make sure that people know. So if you take even the issue about citizenship today, so Amy just, as we're here, before we walked in here, he was about to do an executive order that would put the citizenship question back on, even though the Supreme Court said that his reason was not good enough to have it, and therefore he couldn't have it. But you just heard Amy say that over the course of the last 2 hours, he decided not to do it. So the question I would ask is, what what do you think about this kind of zigzag and the chaos and the confusion and the impact of all of that?
Well, he's not going to do it through an executive order. He's going to do it in some way.
Sorry. I missed that as I was giving my speech.
And I can just tell you from the reporting, he said, this isn't the way it's going to work. Just like last week, the Department of Justice said, we're printing out the census, and then the next day he tweeted something and they had to do a complete 180. He is going to do whatever it takes to stay in power. That's one of the two things. And one of those two things is our election is not going to be fair in 2020, not remotely fair. And the citizenship question, which despite, again, Fox News and all the others talking about the illegal aliens and we haven't had a citizenship question since 1950. It's going to be a way, Cuccinelli slipped last Sunday in the talk shows, of rooting out people that aren't here legally, even though technically that's not what it's supposed to be used for. It's going to be a way to discourage people who aren't white from voting and being counted. So, this is all part, there are so many things that are happening that are not normal that he's just sort of getting away with. And he hasn't stopped on anything that he's wanted to do. Like, for example, when he wanted to do his border wall, Congress wouldn't give him his border wall. He did an executive order. He's still getting away with it. He's been stopped somewhat by the judiciary system, but all these things, they'll come up with another way around it. And it's all sort of setting the stage for, we're in many ways already in an authoritarian regime. Like, we can talk about the 2020 election and what that will look like. But these are all setting up for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what, so that kind of begs, before we get to questions from all of you, that kind of begs my last question, which is, okay, this is really bad. What do we do from here?
Right. So, my book came out in April of last year, and so last year when I did my book tour, and then it morphed into going around the country and helping candidates, my main thrust was we had to take back the House. We had to have some check on power. What we subsequently have learned by taking control of the House is it doesn't work unless we make it work. In other words, the House of Representatives, here we are well into their session, and pretty soon we're going to be too far beyond being able to do anything about it, has still not in any meaningful way been able to hold him to account or had him suffer any consequences. He's thumbed his nose on their check and balance power. So while we're able to stop the worst in legislature by controlling the House, we haven't been anything, so much of why we took the House was to put a check on him. So I look at it right now, and my background, as you mentioned, is in Wall Street, as like a risk analysis. What is more risky, waking up on November 4th, 2020, when either Trump has won in the way that he won this time with help from others, and or will not leave, or doing something now? Let me just ask the audience, how many of you have actually, be honest, read the Mueller report? Okay, so that's about 3%, which is about, and our Congress hasn't read it. I have read it because I have to, and I've listened to it on Audible, which is really an easier way to digest it. But I can tell you, he should not be in office. And I can tell you what they brilliantly played off like a reality TV show is that Barr dumbed down the narrative, and we haven't held Trump accountable. What we haven't heard about in the Mueller report and why we need Congress to act, so when you're asking me what we should do, we should be calling every single day and showing up at offices and town halls, and since we're all from around the country, and getting our members of Congress to open an impeachment inquiry. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to have articles of impeachment. And when I started doing the list, people called me Cassandra because I would see things, and they would look at me in like utter horror when I did these Move On videos, and I was like, no, this is actually what he's doing. I can tell you we will not have a fair 2020 election. I don't need to be glum, I'm just being realistic, and everyone will say, but this will happen. No, he controls the military, he controls the Department of Justice. Barr is doing things that he's not supposed to do. He's supposed to defend Obamacare, not fight to eradicate it. They're not supposed to get Paul Manafort moved off of Rikers. They are basically Trump's legal team. So who is going to remove Trump if he loses and he says it's close? And he says, because he's still saying, including last weekend in his interview with Chuck Todd, that there are illegal aliens. There are still millions of them. So that's going to be the deportation raids he starts, because he's starting this narrative that there are millions of illegal people that voted for Hillary. They're still here. They're killing, they're killing and raping women, but they're still here. So when he loses, he's going to go to the courts, and at that point, he's going to control so much of the court. Who is going to kick him out? The other thing he's going to do is he's going to get rid of term limits. He's been telling you since my book, year one, that he was going to get rid of term limits. He told you in my book that Ivanka was going to take over after his time in office. Folks, this is actually happening here. Even before we get to the election, if things don't turn out, if he doesn't get his citizenship question, he's also told you out loud in an interview that he will take foreign help and not report it to the FBI. And all of all the help that we had in keeping out Russia when Obama was in office, now you have acting heads of these agencies, including Nielsen now. She's been replaced by one of his cronies. Even as bad as she was, the new people are worse. They're the ones that are supposed to protect our elections. So our elections are not going to be protected. Russia is still here. Other countries are here to help him. So we're going to wake up on November 4th, and it's going to be too late. The things that are in the Mueller report, Volume 1, the only reason he didn't collude with Russia is because people didn't do what they told him to do, or his people were too stupid to get it right, literally. That's part one. But Russia installed him. Whether he knowingly was part of that quid pro quo or not, that's the only thing Mueller didn't establish. But Volume 2 and the 10 acts of obstruction of justice and all of this, if this isn't brought into the public domain, including our lawmakers who readily will admit, including Lindsey Graham, who's head of our Senate Judiciary Committee, what happened, then what prevents it from happening again? We've already normalized it. We've normalized that we can have our own Roy Cohn, or Cohn, whatever it is, running Justice Department, who will do whatever Trump asks. We have normalized the fact that whatever, what one person wants to have done is done. And these people, unlike Don McGahn and others who, as bad as they were, who said to him, no, I won't fire Mueller. I won't fire Rosenstein. I know that's the only reason he wasn't successful in getting rid of the Mueller probe, is because people quit or said they would quit. But he had witness interference. He had all sorts of things that the public needs to know about. Yeah. So that's why I believe, not this backdoor stuff where they don't show up and they're stonewalled, and McGahn's chief of staff who took fastidious notes in all the meetings, who's referenced throughout the Mueller report, didn't answer 200 questions. We need public hearings with all of these people. The American people need to be educated. The Republicans are loyal to him, but they are like lemmings running off a cliff. The minute they hear from their constituents that what happened was not fair, they're going to shift. We are already at the same point at the height of when Richard Nixon went through impeachment. There was 46% of the public at its height wanted impeachment. We're at 45% with Trump. The risk is we wait into 2020. If we run that election, again, it won't be fair. If it's close, he won't leave. He's told you he won't leave. And that's going to be that's one thing Marcia Gessen warned you too. Believe the autocrat. There's nothing that Trump has said that he didn't ultimately mean. It's a trial balloon to see how it will bounce off. Then it will be too late. It might already, we're on the margin of it being too late as it is, frankly. Sorry.
We invited you because we actually wanted to hear it. So we, in my home, we debate this question about impeachment all the time, almost every day. And I do, as we've got about 10 more minutes, so I want to make sure we take questions from the audience. If people have questions, where are the mics? So this is what I would do. I would actually either, great. Why don't we, there's a hand over here. So why don't we do this one first, and then we'll do someone on this side, and then when people give me the 2-minute warning, I'll tell you. So why don't we try to do quick questions, but tell us your name. And remember, the Judiciary Committee has actually gotten Mueller to testify on July 17th.
We'll see if he testifies
We'll
in
see
the
if it
grounds
actually
of him
happens.
testifying.
But hopefully it will be an important moment for people to watch.
Hi, my name is Kendra, and I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, from the Norfolk Federation of Teachers. And
Kendra?
I hate to ask the obvious question, but like my heart is racing from everything you just said. What do we do? If the election is going to be a setup, what do we do?
We have to do everything in our power right now to get our Congress to act on impeachment. There's, depending on the count, somewhere in the low 80s, so about a third of the Democrats in Congress. I would target the people in the Senate, on the House Judiciary Committee that haven't gone along with it. We have to get everyone in our networks. The most important thing to do is at least have impeachment hearings, public hearings. I think our people in the House need to hear that they got there because we wanted to put a check on power. That is the kitchen table issue. The rest of this is crap. I mean, they can't do anything outside of, well, the Senate is in control of the Republicans anyway. They haven't been able to accomplish anything real. I think we, every single day showing up, marching, staying involved. We have to be super engaged. Literally what is happening now is the early days of the equivalent of the Holocaust. It's just happening at our southern border. It's going to happen with these deportation raids that are happening starting on Sunday. We have to get we have to keep up the activism and demand this of our members of Congress. To me, that's the most important thing is public hearings, not this behind closed door stuff. And under an impeachment inquiry, they can't play these games of executive privilege and so forth that they've been able to play so far. But we can't keep stringing it out for weeks and months, like Representative Neal, who has been trying to get his tax return since April and now just filed like a lawsuit. Here we are in July. New York State passed a law that would allow him to get Trump's state tax returns, but they want to play nice. We have to get them to stop playing nice. We have to, they have to realize that this country is just not going to be, the election will not be fair in 2020. And those of us in this room have to make that happen.
So we have not, as a union yet, taken on the issue about whether or not there should be impeachment. But part of why we wanted Amy to be here is it's a very compelling case, and it helps us have some analysis of this. I am a little bit more optimistic about 2020 because of the states that have Democratic Secretary of States, and so I'm a little bit more optimistic than Amy is about 2020. But at the end of the day, if it is close, it doesn't actually, it's who knows? We have no idea. For example, those two counties in Florida that all of a sudden somebody infiltrated their voting machines. H.R. 1, House of Representatives 1, that act was called for having paper ballots as a backup and also for a recount. So there is a bunch of things, if it's close in different places, you can see that Trump has already said that he's not going to leave office. But if it's
there's
not
21
close,
states actually
right.
that were infiltrated.
Yeah.
It's not Florida. It's just we're not hearing about the rest because DHS is supposed to do that.
Right. So all I'm saying is we have a little bit of a different opinion about whether or not 2020 is out of reach right now. So I just want to
And
put
also
that
the
out there.
Senate. We have to focus on the Senate.
The Senate is absolutely urgent. There was a microphone here.
I think there are women in them.
Right, yes. Oh, there, I'm sorry.
Hello, Jason Marchetti, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. My question for the election of 2020 is for each of you. The first question I have is, Do you think with 20 candidates, it's difficult to know and understand the platform of each candidate? And the second question I have is, when can we expect the AFT to make its endorsement?
So, on the second question, I have no idea. I know that sounds surprising from me, but I have no idea. And the reason I say that, and we had this, and the Massachusetts, I was in the Boston Teachers Union, had a breakfast this morning, and I went through this in some detail. I won't do that now. Part of what we're trying to do is ensure that no one sits on the sidelines in November 2020. So the engagement issue for ourselves is absolutely instrumental. There will probably be many candidates that share our values. There's probably going to be one or two candidates, ultimately, who share our values and can win. And those are the first two guidelines. But it's also going to be a decision, if we do something before the conventions that doesn't make sense at that moment to do something. And that's why I say I don't know, because it may make sense to do something, in March or April, or it may not. It doesn't feel to me that it makes sense to do something right now, because there's too many people that are running who are also, let them actually go through a bunch of these different stages, and the Democratic Party is trying to keep things as open as possible. Even Bill Weld has actually asked for a town hall, and we're trying to figure out how to make sure that that member engagement is robust. So when I say I don't know, but I want you to be involved. And if people want to get involved with a certain candidate right now, that's contemplated by our endorsement process. We want to have people in the floors of the convention. We still have 20% of people who are Republicans, but we want to have people on the floors of the convention that actually, are slated as delegates. That would be pretty cool. So we'll go through this process step by step, but get engaged. And if there is a town hall that Rhode Island wants to do, let's have a town hall in Rhode Island for one of the candidates. How about over there?
Hi, my name's Chris Rusnak, Hillsborough CTA in Florida. Amy, you probably have experience with this, but how do you get through the seriousness of something like the Mueller report with people who have these biases that are friends and family that just don't seem to get it when you're trying to teach them how important this is and what it means?
Honestly, I think the only way to do it is through public hearings. Again, our elected officials, it's going to be in this week's list, haven't read it, a lot of them, in full. And this group, which is a highly educated group, and I just did a book event at the Mark Twain House, which is a highly activated group, 3% of the people, 5 hands went up out of 150 at that event. I mean, it's pretty consistent. That's why it's so important. The stuff in that report is extremely dire from somebody who has read it, the counts of what he's, and if there's no accountability in any way, and the American people aren't brought up to speed, it becomes the new normal.
Over here.
Ingrid Gunnell, UTLA. This is more of both of your, Amy and Randi, your opinion. I heard, Amy, that you said this is the beginning stages of the Holocaust, and I completely agree with you. And I made a Facebook post last week after we demonstrated in Houston against the detention centers there, and how normal it is.
And by the way, we are demonstrating at ICE tomorrow midday and tomorrow night, again, because we're all here and we should do that. So there's a flyer out there. Thank you, Ingrid.
And that's why I'm actually holding it up, because I see on it, it says end U.S. concentration camps. And there is some concern amongst Jewish Americans about calling these camps concentration camps. I personally am of Jewish descent as well, and I feel like I've made many posts over the last 2 years. This is Hitler's playbook. Trump is not smart enough to have anything creative or new. Everything that he's doing, Hitler has done, or Ataturk before that for the Armenian genocide. These are all things that have repeated. So what is your opinion or perspective on calling these concentration camps and comparing this to the Holocaust?
So my opinion is it's not an argument worth having. Like, I think people should do what's in their comfort zone. I think it's more important that we are aware, that we are advocating, that we are not normalizing. There's a poll out this week that 60% of Republicans believe that the people on our southern borders are illegal aliens or illegal immigrants, and don't understand that asylum is a U.S. law and an international law, and those people lawfully are allowed to come into the United States and be processed. So my answer to you is we cannot look away. Already last year when the family separation policy first happened, there was so much outrage. And now, as with everything else, my real concern is that we've normalized it and stopped caring. Like the Naomi Shulman poem of like the nice people that didn't want to talk about politics because it would ruin their dinner parties while they were not marching the Jews down the street. So to me, it's neither here nor there. The important thing is that our members of Congress are holding him accountable. And to me, the only way of doing that is through a public inquiry on what he's already done. And that's the only way they're going to cooperate, through an impeachment format.
And so as we close up, sorry, we have run well out of time, but as we close up, let me also say, Ingrid, it is think about what we do as educators. It is often what is heard, not what is said. And there is a point for the shock of it. Sometimes it's worth getting people out of their slumber, but at the end of the day, it's very important then to be able to defend what we are saying. And I think that there have been actually, I don't remember, 50, 100, maybe more experts of the Holocaust that actually did write a letter saying that these camps have the kind of indicia or characteristics or attributes of detention camps that one saw, not the death camps, but of the detention camps. And so, but I think part of our role as we close is that the role of not being silent, but also of being guardians of the democracy, of also understanding, being awake during this period of time, the advocacy that we must have. That, what Amy said about, you saw it in terms of the ACA, you see it in terms of pre-existing conditions. There is still an ability for we the people throughout the country to influence and to lobby our legislative representatives in the Congress, including on the issue of accountability. And you see how little the Republicans want to actually touch healthcare because they saw the blowback that they got. And so we have to be awake about these things. This session was not intended to have anybody slit their wrists. This session was intended for us to be awake and to understand what's going on, and to then use our ability to teach and to lobby and to advocate to do something about it before it's too late. And with that, I will see you all tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your sessions today. And thank you. Or for those of you going to the fashion show, I'll see you later today. And Amy, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.